We
Oh no,
don't
I'm
have
thinking of
smell-o-vision, but
no, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of slicing the carrots. I mean, drone comes by and you just,
Just
All right, guys. Well, we've started here. I've started the recording. Welcome to the third series of NDI webinars we're doing. First one was an introduction. The second one was NDI for designers and integrators. And now we're doing one that's focused on how do people use it? What are the problems they're experiencing? What are the problems that we can help them get over before they even experience them? And I think this is the one that's really where the rubber hits the road. Because, I don't care if designers or integrators, if they put the stuff together, unless they have a user that's using it, they're not going to be doing it. So I want to start off with introductions across the board again. We have John Ellison, Kane Peterson, Tamiko, and Craig Keeney. We're all, experienced at doing these NDI webinars. I'm more experienced at sitting back and letting other people watch. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. Kane, take it away, man.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, my name is Kane Peterson, and I'm with New Tech. I'm on our professional services team, so I help a lot of our clients get the maximum use out of the systems we sell, be it our switching systems and replay systems, but also with NDI workflows as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and if they have any questions, I will try to answer them.
Cool. And Craig, why don't you do a little intro of what you help out over at Synex and taking care of?
Hello, my name is Craig Keeney, and here at Synex, we are a distributor primarily of IT products, and we help distribute some NDI products, a lot with video 360 cameras and things of that nature in mind. My specific area in Synex is that where we help actually design for our resellers. So if we have some resellers that may not be familiar with the technology and other areas of AV, we help design and put together an actual AV system for them. And this may stretch out well beyond, obviously, just NDI. NDI also goes with it just being over the network and stuff. We have to find out if your network can actually handle it, or if we need to build out a more robust system in it for you as well when designing this stuff. So we help and ask probing questions to make sure and everything you're going to get a well-built system.
Well, thanks, Craig. And John, you're
well,
you're the epitome of users.
Yes.
I don't know whether it pity me users, but I'm a retired professor with way too much time on my hands. But with the growth of NDI and now moving further and further out and getting closer to the end user, unlike when Craig sets up a room in a university or a school or works with a broadcaster, they have crews, they have IT people, but now we're getting NDI cameras at a price range and capabilities that individuals might be wanting for their own home studio or home office, or even maybe their individual office at work. So I thought it'd be good to ask questions about how to deal with the small user, but there's lots of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really key for NDI growth is going to be not just the big users, but all these individual small offices and home office users that may want to use NDI rather than stringing cables otherwise. Tamiko, you created a troubleshooting document in coordination with Kane. Why don't you give us a quick, brief overview of that, and then we're going to let Kane take over some of the, I don't know, the simple setups, and then I really want our attendees to, just flood us with questions. I want to know what the issues are that you're facing. So, Tamiko.
I don't have it pulled up because I just walked in the door. I'm sorry. We thought we were having an MRI. So anyways, one of the biggest things that when you're troubleshooting anything at all, it's start at the beginning. Start at the beginning. Don't start in the middle. and then start trying to change things. Start at the very beginning of your system and work your way systematically from point A literally to point B, and take nothing for granted. So if you are sure that you're on the right network, make sure you're on the right network. If you are absolutely positive that all your cables are good, make sure they really are good. Make sure that even though it looks like it's plugged in, things are actually plugged in. Make sure that you're able to consistently have speeds that will support NDI, because NDI waits for no one. That's what makes it so amazing and so fast, is the fact that it's not buffering forever. Make sure you know how to describe your problem really to people. And when I was talking to Kane, well, Kane, give us that rundown, because it was just, you put it so beautifully and so simply. It's either just discovery or transmission, and there's like a couple, just few things in either category that you're going to be running into, right? I mean, is it seen on the network? Okay, if we see it on the network, how do we make sure that it's getting out?
So, yeah,
Yes,
why don't you go ahead and jump in here,
sure.
and we'll start with problems, then we'll go to how to use the stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So Tamiko and I, we talked a little bit last week, and I mean, certainly, I mean, I'm not trying to say this encompasses everything, but one of the most common issues that I find is, well, one of the most common things I need to help somebody find the solution, maybe that's a better way to put it, is a good description of what's going wrong. Because unfortunately, a lot of times it's a very general, it doesn't work, right? It's not showing up. It's not descriptive enough to actually let me know, like, what are you truly seeing? What's going on? And so I think the best place to start is just a little bit of what I mean by that stuff. So when you have NDI and things are not working the way they should, generally your problem falls in one of two camps. It's either a discovery issue or a transmission issue. And the way you need to proceed to figure out what's going on can be very different based upon which side of the of that we're talking about. So discovery, which to be honest is probably the more common of all of them, is where I can't get it to show up, right? I'm trying to connect to a device, I'm trying to access it and pull that video in, and I don't even see it in the list, right? I click on my list and it doesn't appear. So if that's what's happening, right, that's what I need as a description when somebody says it doesn't work, and you say, well, what's not working? Well, I can't get it to, I can't get a signal in. Well, are you even seeing it to pick it? Or can you pick it, but then you're not getting something, right? There's a definite difference there. So now when it comes to discovery, since that is probably honestly the more common of the two that I run into, one of the most common issues that people run into, and this is on Windows, although it could happen even on Mac and Linux as well, is that the firewall is blocking your communication, right? Because all the operating systems today do come with a built-in firewall. Now, you could be using the built-in firewall. You might be using a third-party firewall, like, often when you install a antivirus security suite, it installs a higher end, or as I would like to say, a more permissive firewall. And I only say it that way because what I have found is that the Windows firewall generally works fine in most cases, and it's very much out of the way for a lot of people. I think these third-party firewalls, they want to be a little more in your face so that you kind of see that they're doing something, but that also kind of means that they could be more likely blocking what's going on, right? Because they're kind of like, hey, I'm going to, stop this traffic from coming in because I don't know, what it's being used for. So that's one of the most common issues. And on Windows particularly, a lot of people, when they first plug into a network, they see this message pop up on the screen. And unfortunately, Microsoft's done a very good job that in every version of Windows, they kind of change the question. But in all cases, it's the same thing really being asked. So you might have seen it popping up saying like, what kind of network are you, right? Are you home, work, or public? Or maybe you see a message pop up saying like, should you be discoverable on the network? Or what kind of network are you, public or private, right? And, so in the different versions of Windows from 7 to 8 to 10, we've seen the same thing happen, but being asked differently kind of each time. And what that does, and this is important because what that's saying, or what that's asking, it's Windows trying to say, how secure should I be on the network that you just connected me to? So this happens anytime you plug a computer in the first time to your local network. Windows recognizes, hey, I've never been on this network before. How secure should I be, right? And so that message pops up, and they want you to pick something. And of course, they give you the option to also pick nothing, right? Some people just close it, or they kind of make it wait and it just goes away on its own. And like, oh, good. I didn't even have to answer that because I didn't know what it asked. But what's happening there is that if you don't answer it, it picks the most secure option, which is public, right? And so no matter which way it asks the question, if you end up in public, you're ending up in the most secure mode. Now, what public means in this regard, I know I'm being a little detailed, but I want to explain it fully so people understand what's happening.
This is really important because a lot of people assume if I'm public, then everybody can see me. But it's
kind of backwards of what you might think. Yeah, exactly. Because it sounds public. Oh, yes, I want the public to see. But really, it's telling you kind of who you're being protected from, or I guess. So it's kind of the use case. So if you're in public, the idea is that you're using your computer in a public area, like a coffee shop, right? I went to a coffee shop. I connected to their Wi-Fi. Windows comes up and says, I've never been in this coffee shop before on this network. Are you at home or work, or should I be private, right? That's kind of one mode. Or should I be in public mode, right? Because I'm in a public place. And if you don't answer it, or you pick public, right, you end up in that mode, which basically tells Windows that the only thing you should be able to talk to is the internet, right? You want to get to the internet, but everybody else on that local network around you, right? Everybody else in that coffee shop, I should ignore them, right? I should not talk to them. I should not allow their traffic in. I'm not sending any traffic to them. I'm going to block anybody on the local network. But of course, that's how NDI wants to work, right? NDI is to work with all the stuff on the local network. So if your computer defaults into public or is set into public, you are effectively blocking local traffic from communicating. And that is probably the number one issue people run into with NDIs. They plug in their computer, they don't know what to pick, or they maybe didn't even realize that way long time ago, that's what they picked, right? And it defaulted to public. And, again, they'll say, well, I can access the internet fine. I just can't see any NDI stuff around me. It's like, well, that's exactly what public is going to do, is it will let you access the internet, but it won't let you access anything around you. So you'll have to kind of look on which version of Windows you're on as to exactly the process to change it, because again, they change it from 7 to 8 to 10 for good or for bad. But what you want to get it in is that non-public modes. Like on Windows 7, you want either home or work. On Windows 8, you want it to be discoverable, right? You want to be discovering the people around you. On Windows 10, you want to be private, right? Where I'm on my private network. That's kind of the terminology ideas they've gone with. And that will let NDI then talk to what's around you. So that's almost the number one issue that we run into. Beyond that, there are certainly other things that could be causing problems. And I mean, I guess if people ask, we can try to get more into them, but that public-private networking is by far the most common one I run into.
And what about groups, Kane? Because you can be on the same network, right? And you can have your network set to private, so you can conceivably be talking to everybody. And you can have your firewall and your antivirus set so that it allows everybody to be, but then still have a problem because you're not in the same group.
That is true. NDI devices default to a public group. So now in this case, we're kind of using the terminology as to who you're talking to. So if you do that by default, that's what you end up with. But it is possible to create groups. And if you were to remove yourself from public and put yourself into a separate group, then you would also potentially could be hiding either who could see your output or whose outputs you can see. So that's something else you could run into. And I'll admit, I've done that myself, where I'm like, we went and set up somewhere to do some show. I come back, my laptop was still set up for the group, and I'm sitting there for 5 minutes trying to figure out why does nothing show up, until all of a sudden it occurs to me, oh, I should go check that. And then boom, there it is. So there's things like that. There's also another common one I'll just throw out as a troubleshooting technique. And maybe I should even just show this if you want. Yeah, so let me, give me just 1 second here, because I've set up where I can do this. Yeah, start up the tool. There's a tool. So one of the things you should do as well in troubleshooting is install NDI tools on every computer on your network that does NDI, whether or not you actually need to use it there or not. If it's going to touch NDI, you should put NDI tools on it, because it's a great way to troubleshoot workflows, right? Where you're trying to figure out, this application doesn't seem to be working right. Well, okay, let's try a different one, right? Or it even lets you do like local loopback, where I can see if I can see myself on my own computer. If I can see myself, but I can't see stuff coming in from over the network, that's a pretty good indicator that the network is causing the problem, right? Because I can see my own local sources on here.
You can get NDI tools, the ndi.tv/tools.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And so the one I want to point out here is this one called Access Manager. This is where you can set up those groups that were just being talked about. So you can see that there's a receive and an output group. I'm in public on both of these, but I can go in and add myself into new groups. Let's just say I was going to add myself into a cane group, right? Just for whatever, right? You can be part of multiple groups simultaneously, but if I was to delete myself from the public group, then at this point, I would only be able to receive signals from other devices that are also part of the cane group, right? And that's where you can be kind of like hiding accidentally, maybe, or intentionally, to obviously, if that's what you want to be doing, certain systems from you. So that's something you can do. By the way, if you delete all the groups, right? If I just went in here and hit delete, 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 and deleted everything till there was nothing, you will automatically be put back into the public group. So it's impossible to be a part of no group. If you're part of no group, you're automatically back in the public group, which is another little nice thing to know. But the other thing I was going to mention that's a good, if you're not seeing a source appear, a good troubleshooting step is there's this option called remote sources in here. You can go in and type in, let me just pretend like I had a remote source. You can just, find the IP address of that device, type it into here, and hit OK, and it will add it into the list, and then see if you can talk to that device. Because basically this, instead of just relying on the automatic discovery mechanism, this is basically you forcing into the system a connection. You say, hey, I've got this device, it lives at this IP, I want to talk to it. And if this gets it to show up, well, I mean, you technically could use it this way, right? There's nothing wrong with using it this way, but it's a good way to let you know that, okay, my problem is definitely a discovery issue. And at this point, it's something like, again, a firewall blocking it potentially, maybe like in the switch or something like that. Because some switches do have like those kind of protections built into them, if like it's a layer 3. So this might be stuff then you'd have to look into more, but it's giving you kind of an alternate way to force those connections in there that you can try. So that's all kind of falls around the connection or the discovery aspect. I don't know if you had any other questions there.
Also, just as far as transmission, that the idea that if you could have a switch that's no good, you can also have a switch that's misconfigured. And if you have a known good, simple switch that's not going to do a bunch of fancy automatic things that you can plug in there and see, oh, does this solve my problem? That's a nice thing to be able to do if you have that. And then we have ND analysis, which is not a magic wand, but it allows you to get some sort of a snapshot of what's happening in your system, as long as it's happening during the time that you are having the problem. And then you can bring that to people who are maybe more qualified than your average end user and go, hey, look, I have done this, this, and this. I've documented everything that I've done, all of the changes I've made, the things that I've tried, and I have this snapshot of my system in the middle of when things were going wrong. And then they can hand that all to you and hopefully give you something, give people something to work with, instead of starting from scratch.
Exactly. So that those sorts of things start to fall under the transmission side. So that's where I get the source to appear. But when I selected, things aren't working right. And generally, the most common issues are either going to be you get like a black screen, right? Nothing, or you get video, but the video is bad, right? It's choppy, it's dropping frames, which, to be honest, is probably the more common of the two. But certainly, either thing can happen. And some of them. Certainly, some of the things that I just talked about for discovery can apply to transmission. All right, I'm never going to say that like they're so exclusive that it's one or the other, but there are definitely some things that are more common for one or the other. But in transmission, as you mentioned, a few things there just to look at. You'd mentioned cables. It's always good to check the cables. Cannot tell you how many times I have seen a bad Ethernet cable where and unfortunately you ask a question, is it gigabit? And people will just say, well, yeah, all my stuff's gigabit, but no, that's not my question. My question is, are you getting gigabit speed, right? If you go on the switch and you look, there's usually a light that flashes one color for gigabit and a different color for 10/100 speed. Is it flashing in the gigabit speed? Because, we want to make sure that you're truly getting that. We even sometimes recommend that you go into the switch or into the NIC, or something, you can do it on both, and force the port to 1 gig speed, right? So that you're saying, I only want this to run at 1 gig speed and at no other speed, because Ethernet has this, I guess in some cases it's nice, but it can also be problematic where it will drop down, right? Your cable, let's say, is not delivering the performance, but it says, so I can't get gigabit, but I can get 100 megabit. And so you'll get a 100 meg connection, but that can really cause you to sometimes try all these other things to then find out, oh, this is my whole problem, was I only get 100, base speed, because it looks like it works, right? I've got a connection. I am able to send some video through it. I can access the internet, but it's not running at gigabit, but of course you thought it was. So if you say only run at gigabit, then if the cable can't deliver gigabit speeds, you get no connection. And it becomes plainly obvious that there is a communication problem going on. It doesn't drop down into this alternate mode and you're like thinking things still work, and then it's either an all or nothing. So that also helps. And then, as you mentioned too, a good troubleshooting technique I do is when I go on site for places, admittedly it's been a long time since I've been on site because of COVID, but I bring always a little tiny dumb switch with me, right? Not with the intent that, use this instead, but it's a good way to determine, is the problem in your switch, right? We typically recommend people get managed level switches because they give better performance and more capabilities. That management, though, means you could potentially mess up settings in the switch that cause problems. So if I plug in my little dumb switch and the problem goes away, hey, all of a sudden everything's working the way it should, then that's a pretty good indicator that the switch there's something in it, right? And now at least we know where to focus, right? We know, hey, we got to go on the switch to start taking a look at what settings are in there, because there's got to be a setting in there that's causing a problem. Maybe you got some QoS rules, or maybe the switch is in the, it's got some firewall type rules in it, or it's slowing down that port, or there's a variety of things it could be, but those are always good things to check.
So Greg,
And
Craig, I'm sorry, Tomiko. Craig, you have a lot of experience working with IT groups, but from the more of the organizational level down, what do you find that your users are experiencing in these types of configuration issues?
Mainly the main question stuff and everything that is always centered around and stuff is always going to be the network. They have a network that's already existing and stuff, and then it just goes to very much like Kane says, is their network and stuff actually robust enough and everything to actually still be able to handle putting an NDI system? Are they going to be getting that gigabit speed and stuff like he says from the port? So that's why the point where he brings up, just bring in like a little 5-port dummy switch and stuff and everything that you can get in there just to test things if you want to put something on. And there's a lot of the times why we actually want to put systems on a different system, NDI cameras on their own network versus other things that may have a lot of other traffic. But Kane, this kind of brings up a good point. And I wanted to put something on you because
Okay.
Because I haven't encountered this, but I wanted to see if you had any questions on this when it comes to NDI virtual inputs.
Hmm.
So if somebody wanted to use like a standards-based codec and they had and everything their own computer, their of course the cameras that went to it, and they put a converter on it. Have you ran into any like issues, possibly, like say they wanted to get like a whether it be like a standard like poly system and stuff, trying to install, or what issues might they encounter, have you heard when it comes to doing something like this with putting like an NDI virtual input on a standards-based style codec?
Well, when you say codec, I just want to make sure you're talking
Yes.
a hardware
Yes,
style
a hardware
teleconferencing.
style.
Okay,
Yes.
because in codec, of course, in computer
Yeah.
terms, we kind of mean like the compression used in a file, but I know in,
Yes.
in hardware, the codec is the video processor in a way.
Yes.
I mean, it definitely can work. The big thing that probably when people get into that realm that I have seen people run into with issues is that you do have to take into account what video resolutions are supported by certain devices. And what I mean by that is, for example, like Sparks or Bird Dogs or Magewells, right? We have all these different converters out there. Some are HDMI based, some are SDI based, right? And NDI supports virtually anything, right? So NDI is a very big world of what is it that it can create, right? Resolution, aspect, frame rate wise. HDMI is larger than what SDI can do. And so what can happen is that you could plug in like something that creates like an HDMI signal on one end at a certain resolution and frame rate, and then try to send it to the other end where it's going to be decoded again. But maybe it's an SDI decoder. But if the source is sending you something that doesn't match SDI, well, I mean, the SDI cable can't carry it, right? It's just SDI doesn't support it. And a lot of the converters currently do not have scalars in them, right? So it's not going to adapt it. Some do, most don't, right? So those are probably the biggest things I've found in that case when it comes to interconnecting like to any of these kind of systems. So just make sure you're taking that into account as to what is my source, what's the resolution of my source, I'm going to my destination, what's the resolution of my destination, can these, because we still have to deal with that kind of stuff regardless, even though NDI itself doesn't really have the problem. Yeah. We still often have to kind of like go back to baseband for that last little link. And in that side of it, we can still run into issues. And some people are just, they don't think of that, right? They're like, well, but you know, like I pull it up on my computer and I can see it. And it's like, why won't the converter do it? And it's like, well, because the converter's got to turn it into HDMI or SDI, and it's got to be something HDMI or SDI can display. You know, if it's something really, really odd, it just might be outside the range of what those standards support, right? That those cables can carry. So that's probably the issue that I've most heard of. There also actually one more step with that, and you know, unfortunately, this is something that other people run into as well, is that you have high bandwidth NDI and NDI HX, and while on computers these are pretty much a non-issue, when it comes to the hardware converters, right? Generally, they do one or the other, and you need a matching to decode the encode. So if it's an HX encoder, it needs to be an HX decoder. On a computer, you could do either. But
I believe I learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, there are a few. I think Magewell, for example, even makes one that will do both HX and the high bandwidth NDI. But again, that's just you just got to be aware of that so that you're putting the right pieces in place and where the flows go and who's generating. I mean, in most people's cases, it's usually a non-issue, but certainly we have had a couple where, you know, I got this and I got that. And then I found out that they just aren't quite, you know, this one will create something that one can't decode at this point.
You know, one thing that we found, we make a lot of, we sell a lot of these USB extenders over Cat5. And in that world, one of the things that we find is inductive capacitance causing issues, where if the Cat5 cable, Cat5, Cat5e, is pulled past a fluorescent light ballast or a LED light ballast that is starting to go bad, it's creating a magnetic field there that is disrupting the bandwidth going through the cable enough to where it's causing issues. I want to know, do you see that in NDI at all?
Well, you mean, well, how will NDI handle something like that? I guess maybe is a better question. Yeah.
Inductive capacitance.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, what you're talking about is absolutely true, and certainly there's different categories of network cabling you can get that have like additional shielding in them that you can actually ground, right, to help deal with that. But sometimes that is something that you have to deal with. What NDI does, and this kind of falls under the transmission issue, because it's those kind of issues are probably not going to cause a problem with discovery, but they definitely could cause a problem with transmission. So the way NDI works, right, you know, we got to step back and think about video for a second, right? We're watching a video stream, right? We need to display a frame of video. We're either going to display that frame of video or the time has passed and we don't care anymore, right? You got to remember that's the world, right? That's we are dealing with, right? It doesn't do us any good to display a frame of video later because that frame is done and gone. We're on to the next one. So NDI can be set up to work in a couple different modes, TCP, multi-TCP, UDP, right? And each does have advantages and disadvantages, but effectively, if it's a TCP mode, which is the default generally, it uses a resend mechanism should a packet not make it, right? So it sends a packet. If that packet doesn't arrive at the other end or it's corrupted for whatever reason, that device is going to go back and say, hey, I didn't get that. You need to send it to me again. And as long as the network can send back that request and then a repeat frame or packet is sent in time, everything's good. And generally on a local network, that's not a problem, right? The turnaround for all of this has to be lower than your frame rate. So if you think of like a 60 frame rate video stream, that's about 16 milliseconds. So if your network for whatever reason had latencies higher, you could do like pings to kind of get an idea of this, higher than 16 milliseconds, then that might start to be a problem. But generally, if you do a ping on your local network, you find it's like 1 millisecond or less in most cases, which is, way, way under what's needed. If you are in a network where there's higher latency, then you could switch it to a UDP mode that uses forward error correction. It is going to increase your bandwidth slightly, but then if there's a missing packet on the other end, it can use this forward error correction, this additional data that's got sent to hopefully reform the missing information and still display the frame. So at that point, latency isn't so much a concern anymore. It's just we have to get enough packets there, right? If I miss too many, that I can't display the frame. In either case, if not enough data arrives, right, either too many packets are missed in UDP or the retransmission doesn't come back in time in TCP mode, then what NDI does is it holds the last valid frame of video waiting for the next one. So when you see stuttery video, right, where it's like, hey, it looks like every so often I drop a frame, or maybe it's like every other frame I'm seeing, 9 times out of 10, the reason you're seeing that is that you're getting too many drop packets, too many missing packets, too many corrupted packets, and NDIs cannot deliver what's needed in time. So it's just, instead of going to black, right, or something like that, it doesn't degrade the video, right? It doesn't like get a lower resolution or something like that. It just, okay, I could display this one. I can't display that one. Oh, but I could display the next one. I'll view that one. And of course, even if those other packets arrive later, it doesn't matter, right? That frame is done and gone, right? We don't need that anymore. We're on to the next frame of video. So that's kind of how the mechanism handles missing information.
It's like you're putting a puzzle together, and then you've dropped some pieces on the floor, but the floor turns into a void, a never-ending void. It's just gone and done, and that's it. This is your life now.
In a way, yeah. Now, if you can find the piece fast enough and grab it, then great.
Before it gets all the way sucked into the void. Get it before it gets to the event horizon.
So NDI will do everything it can to try to resolve it, but obviously, if the network is not capable of resolving it in time, well, then it's the best it can do is hold a frame and proceed on to the next one.
Okay. Well, thanks. So we've got the discovery, we've got the network stuff, the physical connections. What would be your suggestion for a user like John? John's going to set up an NDI network for home streaming. we'll call it. You know,
Mhm.
whether he's actually using it for streaming to the net over YouTube, Facebook Live, whatever, or if he's doing a,
Well, I could be
collaboration.
more than random ideas. I've had some people talk to me, and this is a good chance for me to ask those questions
Sure.
because you could turn
Good.
your iPhone into an NDI camera, right?
You can. There is an app to turn an iPhone or an Android phone into a camera.
And of course, NDI lets some things work with hardwired NDI cameras where your camera can get power, the Ethernet connection, and the video. So it's a one cable solution.
Definitely. Yep. A lot of
Yeah.
PTZ cameras are that way, but there are even some non-PTCs you can get as well.
Yeah. So that has some real advantages to some people who are doing ad hoc offices or home offices. The idea is that if they have an iPhone, you have an NDI camera. If you decide you're in a situation that you're Victorian house, and if you punch a hole in the wall, you're in trouble. So being able to run a very thin, I don't know if I've got it here, my I could hold up an extremely thin small wire that can even press into a baseboard. What are the steps that somebody has to do to actually try to do NDI in a home office setup? And so I guess the questions to you would be, if I'm trying to help somebody, saying I really think you should get a hardwired NDI camera into your home office from all the problems that you told me, but they're not quite ready to do that. I said, well, let's use your iPhone so you can begin to see what NDI could be like. So how would you guide me through this?
Well, yeah, maybe an easy way to start is let me show you kind of what I have, and we could talk about the pieces and why I've chosen some of these, and then we can even talk about alternates that can fit in there. I'm going to start with just saying, because I work for New Tech, I kind of have a lot of gear around me, so I
you could go to the candy store and pick any.
I guess in a way you could say that way, but
I'll let you adopt me.
So here, like for what you're watching right now, this is my setup in here, right? When you saw me on the virtual background, right? This is all the equipment I'm using. I could get by with less, but again, since I had it, I'm like, well, I'm going to use it. So I'll just kind of go around in a circle and kind of describe here. So I'm actually using a JVC HM200 camera, right? So that is the camera that you're seeing me on right here. Now I just have it in HD mode, but this camera actually will do 4K. So I could do 4K if I wanted to. Because this camera does not have any built-in NDI functionality, I then have it connected to a Spark Plus. This takes HDMI in, turns it into NDI, and that's just mounted right on the top of my camera. It's got even a little tally light on it, so I can see, just looking at the camera, whether I'm on program or preview in there, and then that's plugged into my switch. In my case, I have a 16-port TP-Link switch. I would always recommend that you put in a dedicated switch. I mean, yes, I know there are, switches built into like the routers, right, that you use for your home network stuff. And I'm not saying you can't make that work to a degree, but I think you're always going to be better off if you have a dedicated switch that you use. And I would highly recommend get a switch big enough that you can plug everything into, right? Not again that you can't have a switch plugged into a switch plugged into a switch, but now if you do stuff like daisy chaining switches, that becomes more troubleshooting, more points of checking and stuff like that. If it's just one larger switch, it just tends to make the whole workflow easier, right? It's just plug it all in. It's one thing to check, and right, and less potential for bottlenecks in bandwidth, right, when I go between switches and stuff. So I have a TP-Link 16-port switch. This one is it's a managed switch, although I'm going to be honest, this is the lowest management level switch you could potentially get. I mean, it does have a web interface, and I can go in and tweak a few settings, but it's very, very basic. But for my needs at home, it works fine. I then have my computer plugged into it. That's actually running right now. You can see, of course, the Zoom call going in the background, and my my PDF that I'm showing you here, right? So that's plugged in using NDI. I'm using a TriCaster, right? And that's what's creating the virtual set and stuff that you see when you're looking at me like this, right? I'm using a TriCaster to put the virtual set behind there. I also happen to have my microphone and my earpiece plugged in the TriCaster, and that's doing all the mixing for the audio, so I can talk to you and I'm hearing you and all that kind of stuff. And then of course the output of that, right, all of that mixing comes back out, goes back into my switch. And then I'm using another computer. I could use my laptop, but again, since I had a machine lying around, I'm like just going to use it. And that is running the Zoom client, and that's also running virtual input and NDI screen capture. So that's how I'm getting the output of my, so the camera literally goes camera into Spark, into Switch, into my TriCaster where I composite it on the virtual set. Then I come back out of the TriCaster into this separate computer, which then is running the Zoom call, and that feeds the Zoom call in, right, so that you can all see what's going on. And of course, the audio from the Zoom call is coming back out, and that goes back down to my TriCaster into my earpiece so I can hear it. And then finally, my home router, right, that connects me to the internet. My switch is connected into that, and that is how I get final internet access for everything, right? So that Zoom and everything is talking. This is also supplying all my DHCP, so that all my devices, when I plug them in, they just automatically get an address. DHCP, something I highly recommend. I know some people like to go static IP addresses, and I'm not saying you can't, but in my opinion, you're better off going DHCP, right? Why do you want to take on all the management of the IPs? That's what DHCP is for. Make the computer do it all, right? Just set up a range and boom, plug things in, and they automatically get an address, and I don't have to deal with it. Now, that being said, I do have a few devices on my network, so I keep a list of all the ports on my switch, what they're connected to. The couple of devices I do have with static addresses on them, I keep a little list so I know what those addresses are. So like the switch itself has a static address. So if I ever need to get in and program it, right, I know what that is. I've got like a little NAS in here that's got a static address. I don't want it floating around. But all my other devices, to be honest, that are NDI, I don't really care what address they get, right? I'm just going to turn them on. NDI is automatically going to find each other. So whether the IP is the same or different, it doesn't matter to me. It's just, I'm picking it off a list. I just need to know what the name of it is. So I have a little, chart here that I use if I ever need to reference when I do anything in my network. So hopefully that helps a little bit demystify what are all the pieces I've got in here. Why am I using something here? Again, I could certainly probably shrink this down if I really wanted to, but it was like, why not? Since I have that. So does this bring any questions maybe as to like, well, what could we put in here instead? Or what about if we wanted to do this other thing?
I'm curious.
I would sure love to have them. Go ahead.
Well, again, one thing I just wanted to mention real quick. Now I get this call every once in a while with our Sabre 20 camera. It comes from the factory with the preset IP address.
IP.
So all you have to do is use the on-screen display, change it to DHCP, and you're good to go. Just wanted to mention that if anybody has a problem with the Sabre, first thing to do is check to make sure that you have it set to DHCP, you're good to go. It's eminently discoverable. It just pops right up. So
yep. That's just getting your stuff configured correctly the first time. And that's a good way to do it because then you know what the IP is. But of course, as soon as you have more than one camera, you need to have them at different IPs. So DHCP is going to make that management easier once you get the initial configuration done.
Yeah, so I apologize. John, go ahead.
Oh, no problem.
No, so if you put that diagram up again, which I'm going to make my Christmas list from there.
All right, there we go.
So I know you own the candy store. So what NDI or TriCaster are you using? Are you using just the 4K mini for your house?
It's not even a 4K mini. It is a TriCaster mini. Actually, it shows the little SDI plugs on it, but that was just a picture I had. The one I actually have is an HDMI mini. It is an ancient, one of the first model mini HDMIs that ever came off the line that I'm still using today. Now, I have higher end TriCasters and stuff, but for doing this kind of stuff, I tend to use that one because it's small, it's quiet, and it's just I've kind of got it set up to do these kind of meeting calls like this very easily, with a green screen key already set up in it and everything. So I can just kind of turn it on, it launches right into the session, and boom, there we go.
So for somebody who was like John was saying, say you're just trying to dip your toe in that water and just see what you can do. What would be the very bare bones that you would need to make this happen?
Well, so you could start with, as mentioned, if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, right, you could get one of the NDI camera apps for it. They're not free, but they're not terribly expensive. And that will allow you to turn that device into a source. And then once it's on the network, now, obviously that with a phone, wireless is going to be involved. So you want to have the best wireless you potentially can have between the phone and the access point. And it's the same thing too, when it comes to wireless, you also want to try to reduce any other wireless activity going on, right? So for example, this is another common one I have, like people are like, have a laptop and I'm like, well, how's that laptop connected? And they're like, oh, well, just Wi-Fi. And I'm like, well, does it have a network port on it? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, can't you plug it in through the hard line? They're like, yeah, but I want it to be mobile. I'm like, is it moving anywhere for this event? They're like, no, it's going to sit on this table. I'm like, plug in a cable. I know it seems obvious, but I mean, sometimes it's just until somebody says it, you're just kind of like, if it's not moving around, why does it need to be Wi-Fi? Free up that spectrum for other things. Because Wi-Fi, the more people that talk to it, the more noise and the lower performance you're going to get. So you want to reduce that overall Wi-Fi use so you can make it as available for other things as possible. So, get a phone, good Wi-Fi, make sure it's everything else is not using Wi-Fi if you can. Heck, on a computer, even if it doesn't have a network port, you can get USB to gigabit Ethernet adapters. I'd highly recommend getting one of those if you can, right? So you can hook up wired for those devices. But anyways, that can get you a source. And then the NDI tools software is free, and that will let you receive that source. We include the virtual input, so you could feed it in as a source into video conferencing software if you wanted to. And to be honest, a lot of your phones, especially if it's a newer phone, have better cameras in them than even what your computers have. And so you could, and then you could even set that phone up on like a little tripod stand so you can get it at a nice height and really get it aimed at you and stuff like that you could use with some of that kind of software versus just, being left with, trying to deal with, oh, well, it's just what's built my laptop and it's at this angle and the laptop's set up over there and stuff like that. So,
if I may, Kane, John was asking for, the simplest setup. I've got a Sabre camera.
Yep.
On my network, and it's just going into just a regular switch. And then going to my laptop, and that's it.
And that definitely is a route you could go as well. So yes, I could replace this camera and Spark with like a Sabre or one of those all-in-one PTZ cameras. And if my switch has PoE in it, which to be honest, mine does not. But at the time I bought the switch, I didn't know that at NewTek we were coming out with anything that had PoE. This is before I bought it, before we had Sparks and in cameras or anything, right? So I bought this a long time ago, and I thought I don't need PoE. And of course, now I wish I had gotten PoE on it because I could be using it for all that stuff. But then, yeah, you could plug that in, and that would get you, video, audio plus power. Plug it into the switch, and then yes, using that same NDI tool software, I could receive that signal for feeding into meetings, for recording, right? If I just need to create recordings of stuff, I could do that, or even testing, right? That's just a great way to even start testing your network out. Is NDI going to work on here? I wish I could, see some NDI stuff running across my network. NDI tools is free. Install it on some ends, and you can start using that to send and receive signals and seeing what happens.
Well, so Dan's got the direction I'm going, sort of use case. So if we had a pan tilt zoom camera with power over Ethernet, and we run that to our switch, then on the computer you had the running Zoom, we'd have to install the capture capability to see that but then that would be seen as a camera on Zoom. So that's all we
Yeah.
really need right there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Camera to
So
the switch.
to see that here, you should be able to see my desktop here. So down in the corner, at least on a PC, this little yellow icon is my virtual input. When I right click on that, this shows me all the NDI devices out on my network. I choose the NDI source, both video and audio wise, that I want as my webcam feed, right? So you can see it's actually taking the output of my TriCaster Mini is what I'm using. There's also some adjustments. You can adjust what the video resolution of the webcam is. So one thing to realize about NDI runs at the resolution of what the source is, but webcams and webcam software, right, they can be kind of a sliding scale of video quality. So this kind of sets what the maximum is. The only reason I have it set to 720 is that some software has harder times working with 1080 cameras, right? Based upon the software in question and the computer you're running it on, it might just go beyond what that software is capable of handling. So 720 is a pretty good middle ground. But again, if you test something that can work 1080, you could set it that way. And then I can also do some audio adjustments. So you can see I'm doing a little boost on my audio level back to you guys, which isn't uncommon for a lot of meeting software to need that. So that anyways is the NDI part. And then inside Zoom, right, you can see my Zoom here. I just choose my NDI for my microphone. And under the video side, I choose NDI for my, my video camera. And then that sends a signal into Zoom. And that's how all of you see what I'm doing. Of course, at this point, I'm sending back my Zoom
seeing
desktop
myself,
of everybody.
which is
You're seeing
scary,
yourself
yes.
because, yeah.
That's okay. The more of me is not what you need, but but that, that's real simple. So I mean, and I think that's part of the value here with one cable running from that camera, and then one little helper app on your Zoom computer. You basically go camera to network. Then on your computer, you select that camera in your NDI, and then you turn that into a virtual camera, and then you select that in your camera in your Zoom call, and then you're ready to go.
Yep, exactly. It's and then in fact, and then you could, that's like when you get simple, and then, it could just start growing from there. I mean, one of the common things I know a lot of people ask is like, well, what if I want to change the NDI feed going into that virtual camera, right? Now you could change it in here, right? I could right click on here and change that, but that's manual. And so another question that comes up is like, is there a way to automatically do that? And in fact, you could do that with the NDI Studio Monitor software that has a output option you can turn on. And so what you can do is you can use NDI Studio Monitor to view any feed on your NDI network. And then with the output turned on, whatever feed you're looking at gets passed back out again. And then you tell virtual input to follow that, right? And now you've set up Studio Monitor in front of virtual input. And now whatever you look at on Studio Monitor is what virtual input sees. And Studio Monitor, because it's NDI, could run on a completely separate computer. So somebody over here could be literally changing. So, I mean, it's very, very simple switching, but I mean, even that would allow you to change between different camera sources if you wanted to, just by changing what NDI Studio Monitor is looking at. If you wanted to just do the most basic level, I need to go from this camera to that camera, for part of my presentation or something.
Well, that gets to another, and now I'm talking, trying to get this to the lowest common denominator thing. But in that example where we had that one camera and it was going into Zoom, and you were doing a screen share, but I wanted a confidence camera or a confidence view. Couldn't I do an NDI viewer on my iPad, and then that could be letting me see what my camera is sending, whether I'm looking straight at the Zoom call or, so.
Yeah, there are viewer apps you can get on a variety of either computers. They don't have any for Android. I think there's one made for iPhone. I'd have to double check on that. But, otherwise, there's ways to make that happen. It's just a matter of, what are the devices we're talking about, and, what do you want to use? But yeah, you could have stuff like that going on. And to be honest, I have multiple monitors in front of me, so I usually have the output running on a separate monitor to the side, just so I can glance over and make sure everything looks right, from that standpoint.
Well, and I think that's what, as people want to try to get up their game and their in their setup, that's what they want to be able to do, but hopefully not doing it with a lot of extra monitors. But
Exactly.
so in that example that Dan and I, sort of were pushing on you, we now have a nice NDI pan tilt zoom camera that we could do that.
Mhm.
But now we want to have that iPhone handheld camera, and that's going to be wireless. Now, if I don't want to put that iPhone on the wired network, could I set up a little hotspot with its own wireless? So the only thing going between that hotspot and the phone, and the for the NDI transmission would be on not my Wi-Fi network as the whole house, but my little hotspot, which then I hardwire into the switch. So I'm doing
It's possible you could. Yeah, it's possible you can do that. I have even, it requires a little bit of setup, but it is even possible to take an iPhone at least. And I think you can even do it with some Androids with certain USB interfaces and stuff. But if you install like iTunes, you can actually set up a hardwired using the lightning cable USB to the phone. And you can actually, if you get everything set right, you can send NDI across that. And then you could have your phone technically hardwired, right? And you're not even dealing with any wireless at all, right? If you're in a really noisy environment, obviously it's going to cut down on the portability of the phone. But if the phone is mostly going to be, let's say, sitting on a tripod pointed at something and not moving around much, that might be acceptable. So again, it all gets down to
one of the things I have. One of the extra advantages of that is that it also can do power over Ethernet. So I have an iPhone that I plug in, can run as a camera for days, and still just one Ethernet cable coming to it.
Yeah, so those are all possibilities. It's just a matter of setting that up. One other thing I'll also throw out there, I actually use this. I'm not using it for the setup. I guess we're kind of using it in the setup, but I'm not sending NDI across it, but I have, and it works, is that another option, if instead of Wi-Fi, is power line, right? You've probably seen those adapters that you plug them into the wall, right? And then you plug another one in the wall, and it actually sends a signal over the power, right? Of the circuit in there. Now, believe me, I'm not going to say you're going to get like wired performance, but you're going to get better than Wi-Fi performance. And so I use that. I'm using that right now to send. I'm downstairs in my house. My router is upstairs, and I used to have a little Wi-Fi bridge, right? That was my connection from downstairs to upstairs, but it was so hit and miss with everything and the performance and neighbors and all, I'm like, I need something better. I need something more consistent. And so I went and got a set of power line adapters. I will tell you, just get the fastest you possibly can, right? Don't skimp on it. I got the 2000 megabit ones. Now, I don't even get anywhere close to 2000 megabits. I get about 250 to 300 megabits, but you know what? That's still way faster than my Wi-Fi was. And that's how I get my internet from upstairs to downstairs in my house, is I use that. But I have sent NDI across it. And obviously can't do as much as gigabit, but I could still, I could have never gotten even one channel of high bandwidth NDI across my Wi-Fi that I had, but I've sent 2 or 3 across the power line adapter I had if I wanted to send video upstairs to downstairs or something like that. So anyway, something to check out.
Just talking magic. Now we're just talking magic.
But would you also, I just feel like it, fair warning, because it seems like a kind of a slippery slope. Once you do dip your toe in these waters, you start finding, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And now all of a sudden I have so much capability at my fingertips. You find yourself going, well, like John saying, well, I see what all of my Christmas list will be. Put that out to everybody. So is that fair to say that it's a slippery slope once you realize, once you experience all of the things, the incredible flexibility that you have with this?
No, I think I get where you're going. And so certainly this is one of the areas when I'm helping people figure out, right? Now, I don't work for a reseller, I work for the manufacturer, but obviously we get a lot of people coming to us saying like, what size switch should I get and stuff like that. And I'm always pushing like, go a little bigger, right? Get that next step up. I know it costs a little more, but again, I'm going from the experience that I've seen up from myself, but even from other people I've talked to, where they're like, well, all I needed was an 8-port switch. So I bought an 8-port switch, but then 6 months later, gosh, I would have spent the extra $40 and got the 16-port switch. And it's just like, that's, I'm telling you, because I know it's just like you said, you do this, and then all of a sudden, like, I could do that. And then I can add this other thing. And it becomes easier. And you want to make sure you always have that little bit extra, because the flexibility becomes just, geometric in everything it offers you. And so don't let this one piece of gear be the limiting factor, when just all it would have taken is that one step better, and it would let you do so much more.
Okay,
great.
as they say, Murphy was an optimist. And when people ask me this, say, what do you need? I say, you need all required ports that you have plus one. He says,
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, right? You want to have a little bit of expansion, but often you're going to be like, well, the next step up is 4 more ports or 8 more ports. But yeah, exactly.
Craig,
Don't build to specific, because I can almost guarantee it's going to be not take you very long to be that plus one that you need on top of it.
Craig, when you work with your customers and the integrators and dealers, what do you do to address that particular issue? How do you get people aware this is something important?
Yeah, and we touched on this a little bit in the previous webinar that we did, and what we brought up was try to keep in mind and think about where you want to end up. You may want to start out and everything small, because your budget and stuff and everything may only and everything currently and everything be the size to where it only allows you to put this 1 or 2 NDI cameras and things of that nature on it, but you're trying to build the backbone of the network as if and everything you want and everything be able to do a whole lot more. So then it's just keeping in mind and stuff and everything, well, eventually and everything we want to go here. So it's just everything trying to get out the customer's expectations. Yes, we want to get here, but we want to be in everything at this point, maybe even 5 years from now and stuff and everything, because switches and stuff and everything and routers and everything don't just go bad and everything. They're good for many, many years and stuff and everything. Several. I mean, yes, they come out and everything with newer technologies and stuff and everything, but like and everything Kane said, don't buy the minimum port switch. Go a little bit and everything beyond and everything. Definitely what you need. It typically doesn't cost that much more, and it's definitely you're going to be very happy you did that in the future.
It's just like the difference between getting Cat 5 and Cat 5e, Cat 6e cable.
Even if you wanted everything to talk about, like one of the other things that I also and everything try to recommend, you're talking about cabling concerns, is because then you get the stranded Cat 6 and stuff E versus solid core Cat 6e. The solid core and stuff and everything is going to give you and everything those higher speeds over longer distances. It's a lot and everything better rated than the actual stranded stuff internally. But the problem is a lot of installers and people and everything don't necessarily want to go with the solid core Cat 6 because it has a lot less of a bend radius. It breaks a lot easier. And if you actually not as careful when you pull it, it can kink. And that's obviously going to cause and everything trouble and everything when you go down later down the road and stuff and everything to test in the cables when they're finally terminated.
And then my famous thing was always finding the double grounded cables, only grounded at 1 inch.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're running a little over. There's a couple of questions that are coming in on the chat, but I think that we ought to answer those. One was about WAN and VPN. And I think this is something for Kane, and another one for Kane was NewTek working on upgrading their encoders. So I'll let you go ahead and have kind of the last question.
So for WAN VPN, it is possible to send NDI across that. Now, I'm not going to say it's easy, especially for high bandwidth NDI, because it's a high data rate. And as we mentioned, latency comes into play. And often those are the hardest aspects to address in a WAN type situation. But if the pieces are in place, it can work. I actually did some testing myself just to do this, where I set up an Azure cloud service and set up a WAN between that and my home system. I was just sending HX because my home internet cannot handle a high bandwidth NDI channel, but it could handle HX. And I was over I tried both Hamachi. I did it with both Hamachi and WireGuard, set up both of those VPN solutions, and was able to send NDI signals across that. So it's possible today, but I admit it does take some work, and it's not necessarily easy. This is where NDI gateway products, that's what I call them, Bird Dog, Sienna, MediaLux, they have products that can fit that a little better, where they will recompress, and they'll work through your firewall a lot easier, and stuff like that. So even though you can get NDI to work across it, you sometimes might find one of those solutions is still a better, easier way to go based on your situation in there. And then as for the upgrading the encoders, I mean, I guess I'm not sure exactly what ways they're asking, but I will just say that in NDI 4, which is we're on 4.6 right now, but when we went from NDI 3 to NDI 4, the encoder did get tweaked so that we could get better quality at a slightly lower bandwidth. I mean, obviously it's not going to change it like drastically, but they're always constantly trying to tweak the encoder to get the best for the least out of it. So like our latest Sparks and stuff use that NDI 4 codec, so that has adjusted it a bit. So I don't know if that's what they're looking for. I'm sure the next version of NDI, when that comes out, there'll probably be more tweaks and adjustments. I mean, it's a never-ending aspect to that, of trying to get the best out of it.
Craig, there's a Q&A popped up from Tony Mobley asking about switch configuration. I think you see that there. I'm going to leave that one for you.
Okay. Yeah, he's asking. Looks like he wanted or needs a 5-port switch, and he was going to go 8, and he was wondering if he should go 16. And the answer was, like I said, it just depends all on where you see yourself and everything ended up. If the end user or the customer and everything thinks that they might and everything want to go more and actually add stuff and everything to the network, I mean, 3 extra ports and stuff and everything, it's not terrible and stuff and everything. I mean, I don't think and everything you need and everything as much as adding like a 16, but like I said, that's up and everything to you and the end user, and on like how much and everything that could possibly expand into and stuff. It's not necessarily to go to the 16, but like I said, just me and everything, I would probably look at the cost difference and stuff and everything, and I probably convince myself to go with 16, but that's me.
I think part of it is just how full I mean, are you filled today, right? If you're on 8 ports today, then I would say you should seriously consider it. But if it's only half full at an 8 port and you're only using half, well, then you still got room to grow. So that's part of the equation too, is where is the starting point along with where might it go?
Well, there's a lot of NDI capable products coming down the road too. We have the displays, and we have the digital signage drivers, things like that. I think that if it was me, I would be looking at the 16 just so I don't have to buy another switch.
I think so. Because when you look at what a switch costs, like my 16 port, I think was like $150 to go to the next level up. And I'll be honest, I started with an 8 port, right? That's when NDI first came out. I said a little 8 switch port at home because I didn't need anything more than that. Like NDI didn't exist. I quickly had to upgrade to a 16 because I was constantly plugging things in to do stuff. I wish now, I've lived with it because it's been okay, but if I had it all to do over again, I would have bought a 24. I mean, because there's been times where I'm just like, oh, I want to plug these in. Okay, what am I going to disconnect now?
What am I going to unplug?
Yeah. And, so I've lived with a 16 port, but if I had a 24, I would have been even better. And this is just, admittedly, partly it's because I've got all this new tech gear around me, so I'm looking to plug all this stuff in. But I thought when I bought the 16, there's no way I would have ever filled it. It's like when you buy storage for like a NAS system, right? Y'all, I'm never going to fill that amount of storage. And a year later, you've used it all up and you're like, where did it all go? It's the same thing with the network switch. You're thinking, I'm never going to use those ports. And a year later, you'd be like, where did all these devices come from? Because you just,
you've got the cat video camera running all the time. So
yeah,
you've got all this stuff going. Hey, this has been great. I appreciate the whole series that all you guys have done with us, all the way from the introduction and then the designer side and now the user side. I think it's a great resource for people to be able to access really easily. It's on our YouTube channel. All these videos will be there. Also available through our website. So I want to make sure that if you want to refer back to this or have any of your friends want to check it out, they can easily grab the stuff there. Do we have any questions from anybody, the attendees? Didn't really get a lot of questions here this time. I would love to hear more. If you guys have them, feel free to email us also. I can be easily reached at Dan@BDO36. So that's.
He never leaves the computer. He's always there. Just
I'm there all the time.
always.
One of these days I'll go for a walk. Anyway, I wanted to thank all you guys. Really, it's been a great series. Our next webinar is not going to be about NDI, believe it or not. There's other stuff to discuss, but it will be about education funding and trying to help people figure out a good way to get some good technology into the classroom. So. Yeah, I'd say Brian, NDI forever. All right. Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. And we'll talk to you guys again soon. All right.
All right.
all right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good luck with your thing.